Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we're talking about another battleship role. And as you can see, I've got the German tech tree open. We're talking about the tank role. However, this is not necessarily something that's exclusive to the German tree. So if you're playing a battleship and you're supposed to be tanking, how are you supposed to do that? Well, what does it mean? It means you're supposed to be absorbing damage for your team. This you can do in two ways. Well, technically you can even do it in three ways, but let's go through. So the first possibility, obviously, of absorbing damage is by using your armor. So if we're talking about, let's say, large caliber battleship shells, and your battleship has a decent amount of armor, then they do less damage to you than they would do to, let's say, your teammate in a light cruiser that has no armor and would take a lot more damage from that. The second way is by, well, the tried and proven method of not being hit. So if you can avoid taking damage through clever positioning, and then that is also a method of avoiding or of soaking up damage that your team doesn't have to, and getting the enemy team to focus on you and sustain that, so not die, rather than having them take apart the rest of your team. The third method technically is by using your hit point pool, because as a battleship you have the largest hit point pool in the game. So let's go through this a little bit in detail. First item, armor. The probably best armored, and this is not universal, but it always depends a little bit on the ship, but probably the best armored line would be the German line. Followed probably somewhat by the Soviets, at least the higher tier Soviet battleships, like, let's say, the Kremlin. If we look at the numbers here, actually has a relatively decent damage reduction and citadel protection as well, but nowhere near as good as, say, the Großer Kurfürst, which is still the most heavily armored battleship in the game by these numbers. From there on out, you have sort of more of a mid-range thing. You still have ships like, say, the Yamato, even though which has pretty decent armor, even though the Japanese line by itself is not necessarily known to be very well armored. It depends a little. You've got ships like the Nagato, which is, for her tier, really, really good. And then you've got ships like the Yamagi, which is more like a battle cruiser and does not have great armor. Talking about battle cruisers, obviously I'm talking about the battleship line. World of Warships doesn't distinguish between these classes. So if I'm talking about German battleships, I'm talking about the line leading up to the Großer Kurfürst, not the line leading up to the Schlieffen. These are battle cruisers. They do not have a very, very good armor plating. And then you have a whole bunch of things in the middle, and then you've got the British. And as we've seen, the British line leading up to the Conqueror does not have an awful lot of armor. However, these lines have a capability to tank using their hit points, because they have some legendary commanders, for example, which can stack heals quite significantly, and you can use your hit points to a degree to absorb damage as well. And the whole hit point thing holds true in general for pretty much every line of battleship. You have the largest hit point pool, and because heals are a percentage, so if we're looking at a repair kit, the standard repair kit restores 14.3% of max HP. So not of your current, but of your maximum HP. So of course the ship with the greatest maximum HP gets the greatest absolute value of hit points restored, which means it can then sustain fire for longer. The third item that I was talking about was to use positioning. Now, if we're having a quick look at the Bismarck here, you will notice that her main guns are evenly distributed. She's got two main guns in the front and two main guns in the rear. That is not true for all ships. So, for example, the more classic battleship layout would have two triple turrets forward and one turret aft. Which means that if you want to get all your turrets on target, you have to, well, angle, or at least give some form of, well, not full broadside necessarily. You can, but you don't have to. But you can, you have to angle like around 45 degrees generally. A bit more, give or take. Some ships have better gun angles than others, but that you would have to do to get all your shots on target. Now, if you are in a situation where you are low on hit points, but you want to still fulfill your role, it's a very bad idea to sit like this in front of the enemy. Why is that? Because the targeting ellipsis is relatively wide horizontally. So along the line of the ship, which means the enemy shells are splashing, well, pretty much along the line of the ship. So if you're sitting like this, you're giving the enemy the best chance of getting all their shells on target. Whereas if you're sitting like this, you're only the shells that actually land in the center of the targeting ellipsis will actually hit your ship. And the ones that go a bit further and go a bit forward. But all the shells that are splashing around to the side are going to not hit you, which means that you have negated the damage on account of being somewhere else. Combine this with the fact that when you're looking at a ship like this, it's actually relatively difficult to tell if you're going forwards or backwards, because generally a ship produces smoke, and the smoke tends to trail the ship when it moves forward. So if the ship stands like this, it's relatively easy to see which way you're going. Whereas if you're like this, you cannot see if the smoke's trailing or not. The one thing you can see is the little bow wave in front of the ship, but it's much more difficult to spot, which means that you can actually avoid a certain amount of incoming fire, or you can take it on your bow section, which is very weakly armored and will get large caliber battleship shells often to overpenetrate. So this is if you're positioned like this, or from your perspective like this, that's a defensive position. That's what I would call a defensive position. You don't get all your guns on target, but you are minimizing the amount of incoming fire. And then you vary your speed and vary between going forwards and backwards, or use island cover to your sides to shield this side of the ship, which you do not want to get shot. So that would be a way to negate incoming fire. So all battleships can tank, and yes, even the British ones, because as a battleship you have the largest hit point pool of all ship classes in the game. So part of your job, and this is regardless of tier, even if you're in something like a Wyoming, you still have more hit points, or South Carolina, you still have more hit points than the rest of your team. So you will, if you're not using it, if you're preserving your heals and preserving your hit points, then you haven't really fulfilled that role of absorbing damage that then your team does not have to absorb. That said, the ships that are best suited towards doing this with armor and can as such take more of a frontline role are German battleships, and to a degree the Soviet battleships. The Americans are kind of in the average here. So if we look at, say, Montana, and again, we were just looking at the citadel protection and damage reduction factors, but if you want an overview of the actual armor values, you can go to the CIC website. I'll leave a link in the description, and you can see the actual armor values and see how they compare. But just going by the public in-game values here, like these ships are significantly better armored than others. Right. So let's look at a round of gameplay in the Bismarck, where I'll try to demonstrate a little bit the whole tank business and what the impact in the game is that you have by playing this role. This battle was played during the Warhammer 40k event, which means we have a fair amount of rental ships on the field. I'm going to have to quickly translate this. So I don't want to say it. The Soviet ship is a Vladivostok. The Japanese one is an Amagi, and I think that's all we have. So we're facing a Kansas, an Amagi, 2 Vladivostoks, and a Fiji. Now these Vladivostoks have a special ability that makes them a little bit more dangerous, But other than that, that's pretty much what we'll be facing. So off we go, and obviously I am in the Bismarck. This is on my personal account, and we're playing domination on fault line. So there are no destroyers here, and I am spawning in the middle. So let's quickly pause before we go any further. I am in the Bismarck. I am probably the best armored ship in this round. Does that mean that I can sail forward with impunity and just laugh maniacally as shells bounce off my undefeatable German armor plate? No, I cannot. You can, if you get focus fired in the Bismarck, you will sink just like everything else. So you can't just sail out like you used to in the Atlantico before that thing was brought to its senses. Sit in the middle of everything and just laugh maniacally watching shells bounce off you. Not something you do in the Bismarck. However, it does help to know what is in the enemy team and what you'll be facing. I know that I'll be facing 3 battleships. How do I know that? Because I'm spawning in the middle. The cruisers are spawning in the flanks, so most likely the enemy team is spawning and distributed in the same way, which means there will be probably 2 cruisers around A cup, 1 around C cup, or vice versa, and we're going to face 3 battleships in the middle. And if they're moving just forward, as one is wont to do, we'll meet them around B cup. That is important information. So I don't want to just rush ahead, go Leroy Jenkins, and then get crossfired by 3 different battleships. That is not tanking. That is stupidity. What I would like to do is make the best out of my capabilities, the 3 which I mentioned, which is use my armor to deflect as much damage as I can, use my hit point pool, which means I can't just YOLO out there and get myself killed, because then I'm not using my hit point pool. I haven't used my heals. I've only used my base HP pool, which is a waste. And the third, obviously, the positioning. So I don't want to just sit broadside on and click and furiously tap the trigger button. So off we go. I do want to go with my team. There are no destroyers in the game, so no one's going to be rushing the cup. I have 2 Vladivostoks with me. And I'll be heading into B cup. Now, there's an important geographical feature within B cup. There's an island in it. And islands are very, very good at blocking shells for you. So you can use them as an extension of your armor. So we'll be sailing over into B. There's the player York, which means the 2 bots are on the other side. And then we'll try and make ourselves useful. But notice how I'm slowing down a little bit to make sure that the Vladivostoks can catch up. And I do want to what I would call take point, as in be the first ship out. But I don't want to do that without support. I want to make sure that the Vladivostoks are capable of supporting me. So I've got the 2 following up. And I want to be the first one to be shot at because I have the better armor. I don't want to get killed. That is the important part of the tank role. Don't get killed. If you get killed, you're not fulfilling a tank role, you're fulfilling a marine life improvement role. Okay, that's a bot Miyoko, so we can ascend a salvo out on that thing. But now there's an enemy Vladivostok. Now these are the Warhammer 40k Vladis. They have a special make me a brawler for a short period of time, one-off kind of thing. So right now I'm sailing straight forward, which means the Vladivostok is shooting but can't do an awful lot. So now that he's fired, I'm starting to angle out and get my secondaries on target. Vladivostok somewhat hesitates, and I'm going to get my secondary overload on target. Let's take a very brief look at the minimap. And I'll pause again here. 2 things have happened. First of all, my support's buggered off. So I'm not quite sure. It could. I think one of my Vladivostoks is running over towards C cup because he spotted a bot or something. The other one is still with me. We are facing a Vladivostok, I think the Amagi, and the Kansas back there. Kansas is a pretty dangerous ship and not to be underestimated. But my immediate problem obviously is the Vladivostok. So I'm trading fire with the Vladivostok, but I am severely outgunned. Especially the Amagi can hit really, really hard. So I am showing my broadside to a degree to get all my guns on target, and I can sustain that for a little bit, but not forever. I am somewhat relying on the Vladivostok behind me, to assist with this. But for now, I am tanking for that Vladivostok because everyone's shooting at me because I am the closest target. And at close range, I should be able to do a decent amount of damage against that enemy Vladivostok. And now I'm starting to turn right. Why is that? Because I'm going to give my bow section towards the Amagi. I don't want to sit broadside to the Amagi. I don't have to. And the Amagi is shooting mostly over me, and the shells are splashing next to me. I am giving broadside to that Vladivostok, which I am in a close range engagement with. But we've traded relatively evenly, and he's now sailing behind the island. That means he can no longer shoot me, and the friendly Vladivostok, who is on full hit points, can now engage this ship. Let me pause again. The Vladivostok I've initially engaged is down to 1/3 of his HP. And he's now facing a full health Vladivostok, which hasn't taken any damage because everyone's been shooting at me. I'm down a heal, and I'm down to half hit points. I am now being shot at by an Amagi and a Kansas. I'm not being shot at by that Vladivostok next to the island. I have done sufficient damage to that thing that the friendly support Vladi that I've got with me can finish it off. But my heal's on cooldown. It takes 69 seconds until I get the next heal, which means these 25,000 hit points I have right now is all I'm going to have for the next minute and 9 seconds. Which means I now need to go defensive. And this is why I was initially already positioning my nose towards these two, because that was part of the plan. So now I'm putting the ship in reverse, and I'm showing my my bow towards it. I'm still concentrating fire on the enemy Vladivostok over there to make sure that that thing gets eliminated as quickly as possible, and that the friendly Vladivostok can then assist me with the two remaining battleships. Ideally, that would be ideally. So I've taken another 10,000 points of damage, and that thing is now dead. So now I am fully defensive against Amagi and Kansas. And it looks like the friendly Vladivostok, after that assistance I've rendered and he got his kill, is now going after the bot in A-Cup. Leaving me alone against these two. Nope, actually I am getting some supporting fire, so no, take that back. He is coming around and is giving... I would have hoped that he was going to rush him, but this is what I was calling the defensive position. I've got a full health Vladivostok on my right and something also full health on my left. I'm down to 7,000 hit points, which means I am going to be going in reverse, just only showing my bow section, and the Kansas is now starting to have other problems, which means the Kansas is no longer shooting at me. It's just the Amagi. And now the Amagi, let me pause again, sorry. Now the Amagi has gotten frustrated. He got me down to 4,000 hit points, but it's taken him a minute, and he isn't getting anywhere. And he has now realized that while he is giving a chase, while he is chasing me, he isn't actually getting his guns on target, and he is now giving full broadside to that full health, whatever it was, on my team around C-Cup, while the other Vladivostok from earlier is engaging the Kansas. So now the Amagi is in a turn, and this is the second I know that he's no longer targeting me, and I immediately switch back to full ahead and plan to turn my ship to get all my guns on target, because I've also got a heal coming off cooldown, so I'm recovering some hit points, and the Amagi has now other problems. You see, he's engaging the other ship, so I can immediately start moving forward again, and once I'm certain that he's not targeting... Oh, no, he's still targeting me. Okay, I am still going to turn, because I have now recovered sufficient hit points that I think we can finish off this Amagi, and we're just going to get the secondary guns on target, and then we can take him out. Nah, never mind, he's already been taken out. And as quickly as that... Yeah, this guy hit this Vladivostok over there on my team, didn't take any damage, and the other one is keeping the Kansas busy. And now I'm 13,000 hit points, but now I'm in no immediate danger of being shot at, because now the rest of my team is mopping up the remaining 3 ships, which means I can now engage in some long-range gunnery until my next heal comes off cooldown. And the Kansas has other problems. Also, he can't see me because there's an island in the middle. So I can get some blind fire out at the Kansas and see if we finish that thing off until this becomes an engagement again that I'm actually going to be part of in terms of being shot at. But this is what I would describe as the tank role. This is the thing you do. You soak up as much damage as you can, but make sure that you get out before you are before you're destroyed, because it's no point of getting yourself killed in the first 2 minutes and then saying, oh, my team didn't support me. Of course it doesn't. It's a random team. You're lucky if somebody supports you, but you can create these sort of opportunities of your team to get shots in with impunity while we're finishing off the Kansas. And that's sort of what the tank role is for. I'm down to 23,000 hit points. I've used all my 3 heals. And now now the Fiji is the last ship alive, and I can just finish that thing off. But I've used my hit points, as you can see, and we'll see that in the battle results screen. I show you the relevant statistics. I've used my hit points, and I've used my armor because I have good armor. If I was in a ship that did not have great armor, I obviously can't be that aggressive about it. But I can still do similar things simply by by positioning and by keeping an eye on who's shooting at me and trying to get them to waste their shots and bait them into positions where my team can deal with them. And in the next screen, I'll pause it here. There we get the battle results screen. We have the damage taken in the slot up there is what I'm talking about. So the Bismarck has a damage potential of round about, I think, relatively close to 90,000 hit points. She does not start out with that. She's got 50,000 odd. But we have taken 65,000 points of damage. That's because we have used our heals. Heals are extra damage capability. And that 65,000 points of damage taken on me has not been taken by my team. Now, in this instance, my team was mostly consisting of battleships, so it was not such a huge issue. They could have tanked some damage themselves. But if these ships around me had been cruisers or torpedo boats or similar things, like light cruisers with torpedoes, can you imagine the carnage they would have inflicted while everybody else was focusing on me? And they have not managed to kill me, because at the point in time where I needed to go defensive, I have put my ship in a position that made it as hard as possible to get it killed. And that is, in a nutshell, the tank role. So you can play this in every battleship. Just kind of be aware of your armor. If you're in a German battleship or if you're in a Soviet battleship, you can be more aggressive and use more of your armor to tank damage. If you're in a very lightly armored battleship, like, say, a French or a British battleship, then you have to be a lot more careful about that. But the paradigm still applies, just from longer range. You can't just push in like that. From longer range, go defensive if you need to. Don't get yourself into positions where you're taking overwhelming fire, and create these kind of opportunities for your team to deal damage by getting the enemy to shoot at you. That is sort of a general rule for all battleships. That's what they're there for. And that's it from me today. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.